All right, so let's talk about anti-airs a little bit. So, in my opinion, anti-airing is one of the very most important skills to have in a fighting game. Because if you can't anti-air your opponent, it's going to give them so much more leverage in neutral and at pretty much any skill level. Whether you're a player just starting out, you're at like a lower skill level, or even if you're like a mid or like high level player, if you're not controlling the airspace, you're probably going to have a really hard time. So knowing how to anti-air, knowing the difference in all of your different anti-airs and why would you use one over the other, and understanding why someone jumps in the first place is very important to improving at anti-airing. Now, we're going to be talking about Guilty Gear specifically, but a lot of what I'm going to talk about just kind of applies to fighting games in general. In Guilty Gear, there's a couple of common anti-airs. I think the two most common ones that people will mention is going to be 6Ps and air throws. These are kind of the two more common options that exist in Guilty Gear. So understanding why you use different anti-airs is one of the first steps to getting better at anti-airing. So why do you use 6Ps in Guilty Gear? The reason you use 6Ps in Guilty Gear is because they have what is essentially upper body invincibility. This means that the whole top half of your character during your 6P just isn't there. You know, pretty much everything from like Ram's waist and up doesn't have a hurt box anymore. And that's also why in Guilty Gear you have those interactions where you can 6P grounded pokes, right? You're able to 6P stuff like Ram's Far Slash, Kai's Far Slash. It's because you just don't have a hurt box up there. So 6Ps, of course, they're going to vary in effectiveness based on your character. You know, some characters have better 6Ps than others. But generally speaking, they'll all kind of work for general application. If you're trying to beat somebody that's just doing like a bad jump, and when I mean a bad jump is, I mean, they jumped at a very like obvious spacing, they hit their jump in at a very obvious timing, obvious height, all of that. This is kind of what 6Ps are really good at beating. You know, if you are expecting someone jumping at like this type of situation, most 6Ps, it doesn't matter what 6P you have, most of them are going to work to beat them. So I think if you're just starting off in Guilty Gear, the first anti-air you want to learn to use with pretty much any character is going to be your 6P. They're relatively fast, and they generally have pretty good hitboxes. But the interesting thing to note about a lot of 6Ps, a lot of them don't really necessarily hit angled upwards. So if you look at Kai's 6P, for example, his 6P doesn't really hit up, right? It's just kind of like a forward hitting hitbox. And the reason that it's a good anti-air, it has upper body invincibility. Now, there are some downsides to 6Ps as well. And a couple of those being that 6Ps generally do not hit like right above or behind your character very well. Ram is kind of an exception to this. I don't know if I can get hers to work for this. But like, if your opponent is to do something like this, they're going to jump over you, your 6P is going to whiff. So depending on the spacing and like what your opponent's doing, 6P can be kind of risky, because if they're just kind of empty jumping around, if they're looking to make your 6P whiff, it's going to be hard to actually 6P them if you're just like being stationary. Even if I want to like dash up and then 6P, it's not going to work, right? 6Ps are also susceptible to being whiff punished. So if someone's really good at spacing their jump ins, so if they do something like this, for example, let's say they jump from here, right? In that situation, Kai could hit JS and it would hit me, right? This is a little hard to do with Ram 6P because their 6P is kind of brolic, but if Kai presses JS here, I'll 6P him, right? His JS will just lose to my 6P. But if he doesn't press anything, my 6P is just going to whiff and he can whiff punish me. So 6Ps are pretty good at beating bad jumps, but knowing how to use 6P against someone that's good at jumping is a little bit more difficult. If I want to beat something like this, I'm going to have to either, you know, dash up preemptively or try to do it on reaction to my opponent jumping. And if someone's gonna like jump behind me, if I'm worried about that, I'm gonna have to like wait and 6P the other way, which takes a lot of awareness. It's pretty hard to like, you know, in the moment, know what way you have to input 6P. Like right there, I inputted the wrong way. I was trying to do it the right way, but I didn't know what side he was gonna be on. And then the other thing about 6Ps is because they have recovery, they're also susceptible to things that kind of stall your momentum. So, for example, if you're fighting a character like Millia, let me go pull out Millia real quick. So, a thing about Millia, right? A lot of people have a lot of issues anti-airing this character because she has 2 air dashes and she has extra jumps as well. So, you know, if you want to anti-air Millia doing something like this can be kind of risky because I might actually anti-air here because of Ram 6P. No, okay. So, if you want to anti-air this and then she does double air dash, you're just going to get hit for it, right? Because your 6P has so much recovery, and they don't generally hit that high up in the sky despite being anti-airs. So what do you do about this? What do you do about, you know, people that are trying to empty jump around your 6p? What do you do about people crossing up your 6p, or people just baiting your 6p with air movement? There's a couple of different anti-airs that you have access to in Guilty Gear, and one of them that I think is kind of underrated by a lot of players currently is using 5ps and 5ks. So for example, with Millia here, if she's going to do instant air dash, something that's nice about using a 5p to anti-air is that even if I'm wrong, I'll recover in time to block it, right? If she does do something to bait a 6p, you will at minimum recover in time to block it. And if you don't, or if you're really paying attention, sometimes you can even press 5p again, or 6p the other way, and punish somebody for doing something like this. So for example, right, something like that, right? And if I wanted to 6p it, if I was like really aware, I could do something like that. 6ps are very good at punishing things like into air dashes, for example. So if Millia just tried to do this, hit the wrong button. She tried to do instant air dash JH, for example, and then you're just like, okay, I'm gonna 5p it. 5ps generally, honestly, in a lot of situations, they hit higher than 6ps. And if you're trying to anti-air something like an instant air dash, you don't need upper body invincibility. What you need is a hitbox quickly. So using 5ps for a situation like this is very good because they're very fast and they don't have a lot of recovery. So if someone's trying to bait them, it won't be as bad. You'll at least be able to recover in block time, generally. Now, if someone's using a bigger jump in, right? If someone has like a deep hitting jump in, like Ram's JH, for example, a 5p might not work because the jump in hits so deep, and you're going to need something like a 6p to anti-air it. Another way you can anti-air stuff like this is with air actions. Air throws are probably the one that most people think of. You know, if you are really looking for it, you can just scoop them out of the air with an air throw, right? Air throwing is pretty hard. It's not easy to do. It takes a lot of practice getting like the understanding of like how close you have to be to somebody, the height for air throwing. So another thing you can also do is just use air dares. Air to airs, however, with like JPs and JKs, while they are good, they have a bit of a downside where they're not really that fast if you're trying to do them on reaction. Like if I'm trying to, you know, swat her out of an instant air dash with like a JP, I'm going to be too late if I'm trying to do it on reaction. Whereas if I just do it, you know, in anticipation, it might work out better for me. But if you're doing it in anticipation, that means you're giving up space because you're putting yourself in the air to do that. So there's some risk reward to using air to airs where they can kind of be safer in some cases, but they can also be more committal in some cases because you're giving up ground space and you're letting your opponent kind of control the ground from there. There are some other things about anti-airing that are very important that no one really talks about. Like every top player is aware of this, but I feel like these things don't really get attention drawn to them very much, but they are honestly more important to understand than the actual tools you're using to anti-air. And that is understanding how your movement and your spacing affects anti-airs, and understanding how your actions directly influence when someone wants to jump. So for me, something I'll do a lot, if you ever watch me play, something I will do very often, it sums up a lot even in the corner, is I will dash at somebody and I'll just crouch there. And the reason I'm doing this, I have a very specific mental reason why I'm doing this. I'm not doing this because I think they'll jump. I'm doing this because I want to make them jump. I'm not setting up for like the optimal position to air throw somebody because I think they'll jump. I'm setting up for the position because I know that doing this will make them want to jump. Whenever you get into a situation where you can make somebody uncomfortable, if someone, you know, doesn't really understand like a matchup maybe, or they feel like they're outclassed on the ground, what a lot of people do, whether it's intentional or not, a lot of the time it's not, they're not aware that they do this, but a lot of people go to the air where they're feeling uncomfortable on the ground because the air feels safer, especially at lower levels of play. If you're a lower level player still learning fighting games, very often going to the air is a safe option because people at lower levels aren't good at anti-airing. Going back to what I was saying earlier, knowing how to anti-air, especially at lower levels, is very important. When I'm doing something like this and I'm waiting for somebody to jump, I'm doing that because I want to make them jump, you know? So for example, like let's just record a situation like this, right? Let's say I dash up at her and I want her to jump. Let's say we're doing it in the corner, right? Where she's probably going to up back in the corner because she's, you know, scared of what I'm going to do. I'll do something like this a lot. I swear I do this all the time. Yeah, something like that. And I'm doing this because it makes them uncomfortable, right? So if I'm back here, there's no reason to jump. And this is going into understanding how spacing affects whether someone wants to jump or not. So if I'm all the way back here, the opponent isn't really encouraged to jump, right? I'm not really like threatening them yet. I'm just over here. All of my grounded buttons won't reach them. They're not that scared, right? But the second I end up kind of approaching their space, so something like this, the closer I get, the more likely they are to want to jump because they're feeling, you know, scared. And you don't have to air throw them, right? I often air throw people like this because the nice thing about air throws is that they beat people that are just blocking. There aren't any other arrow blockables in this game. But you can even just do it with like a 6B, you know? So if she comes down and tries to press the button, she's going to get smoked for it, right? And even if she doesn't, I'm going to run up and take my turn because she blocked it, you know? So understanding that like your spacing and like what tools you have available is going to make somebody more or less likely to jump is really important because, you know, if I'm at this range where like Millia, for example, is in my far slash range, especially if someone is kind of feeling, again, outclassed as I've been calling it, they're more likely to jump because they don't know what to do about it. They don't know how to get around far slash. Maybe they're having trouble with punishing it. Maybe their 6P timings to counter poke it aren't very good. Understanding that, like, you know, if you're pressing your good ground poke, this is going to get people to want to jump more. And then going to another tip that I think is really important about anti-airing is that anticipation is what matters for anti-airing. The better you get at fighting games, the more likely you're going to be able to just kind of anti-air out of habit. You'll form like good anti-air habits where you can just kind of react to the situation and then just anti-air your opponent without really having to think about it that much because you just have so much experience playing the game. Your brain just kind of cues up the right actions because you've gone through the situation so much. You know, if you're just getting used to anti-airing people more effectively, it's okay to just not press ground buttons, right? If you're worried about someone approaching you on the ground, the big thing about fighting games is that moving across the ground is one of the scariest things to do. And a lot of people are not good at it. A lot of people, if they're fighting like a ram, for example, they are going to be way too scared to do something like this. They're not going to want to do it. This Millia player is not going to want to just do this, right? Now, some people will because they're crazy, or some people will do it because they're, you know, smart and brave and they feel like they've had an understanding of your button timings. Worst case scenario, you know, if you don't press a ground button because you're looking for an air dash, if you're just sitting there and blocking, you'll at least block it, right? It's not like an immediate downside if they end up dashing up and taking space. So it's okay sometimes to just like wait for them to jump or something. Because if they don't, like, okay, you know, maybe they're just going to sit there. If they just sit there for a couple seconds, whatever, that's fine. You know, you don't need to win immediately. If they run up and make you block something, that's fine too. So understanding why somebody wants to jump. Are they, you know, struggling to deal with your grounded pokes? Do they maybe not understand a matchup? Do they maybe not have an understanding of your timings? Are they just feeling uncomfortable? Are you approaching their space a lot and they feel like they can't get anything safe, right? They feel like they're not safe in their own little bubble. Understanding that your spacing affects these things. You know, if I'm somewhere back here, they're less likely to jump than if I'm standing here, right? If you're trying to punish people for doing bad jumps, again, what I was talking about earlier, where if someone wants to jump something like this, if you're spacing to be to jump in like this, you're not going to do that from here, right? That's not the play. You need to make sure that you're spacing for your anti-airs to work effectively as well. Just understanding that if you want to control the ground, controlling the air is also a part of that. And it's okay to give up a little bit of ground space, potentially, if it means you have to look for the air control a little bit. And something else that's also really important that I forgot to note, by the way, this is another kind of a secret tip to anti-airing that no one really talks about. Going back to how spacing and positioning really matters for anti-airing, sometimes it is best not to anti-air at all and just avoid the situation in general. So for example, you know, if we're talking about Millia again, if Millia's flying around doing her Millia stuff and you don't know how to get her down, and you can't figure out like when she's going to come down, what she's going to come down with, sometimes it's okay not to interact with that. So again, you know, if we take this example where maybe Millia is trying to do something like this, or let's say she does it a little higher up, and you're like, you're not sure how to get around this. So if you're not sure how to get around this, or you're not sure, like, is she gonna press a button here? Is she gonna press a button there? Is she not gonna air dash at all? You know, there's a lot of different things that she can do here. She can do her little rose jump that she has. She has fast fall as well. So instead of contesting this, just leave. Get out of there. And then look to place a button where they're going to land. So if I do something like this, I'm going to try to press like a far slash. And just make them have to block it, right? Or in this game, there are some landing frames after you press an air action. So, you know, maybe I can hit like their landing recovery or something. You don't always have to directly try to contest characters like this, and then oftentimes it's going to get you killed if you're trying to contest it all the time. Sometimes, especially like if you're near the corner, right? So like, let's say you're in a situation like this, and you're like, I don't know what the Milia's gonna do. I'm a little worried. I don't want to try to anti-her. Let's get out of there. You know how much reward you just got? You didn't have to hit her. You didn't have to do a combo. You didn't have to do damage to her. You just got out of the corner and you put her in the corner. And for a lot of characters, that is a huge win already. And you took almost no risk in doing so, right? That's the benefit to using movement to anti-air somebody. If you're using movement to anti-air somebody, you're not really taking a risk. The worst case scenario is they end up making you block, right? So like, let's say Milia here decides to do, let's just say she decides to just do jump forward JH, right? So let's say she's trying to lock you in the corner, right? And you're gonna dash out under her because you're like, I don't know if she's gonna bait my anti-air or not. In best case scenario, you're able to get under her, right? And if I was blocking the right way, I would have blocked that. In worst case scenario, you just end up, you know, blocking it and you're still in the corner. You didn't actually have to take a risk there. And again, this is the type of thing that takes a lot of experience. It takes time to be able to play the game enough that you have reactions quick enough to be like, oh, Milia's in the air, let me dash under her, right? That's not easy to do because her jump is so fast and there's a lot of things you have to think about in the match. But sometimes it is best when you're trying to anti-air somebody. You don't have to anti-air them directly. There are other ways to do it. Sometimes outspacing their jump in can be very good. Something that I do a lot. I will outspace someone's jump in by kind of just like walking back, and I'll walk up and throw them. And the reason for this is that it's pretty low risk for me, right? Or maybe I won't walk up and throw them. Maybe I'll just walk up and try to make them have to block something. If they're maybe trying to do something fancy where they are trying to, you know, empty jump and then whiff punish by 6p. So like, let's say they're trying to do something like this. Whoops. Let's say they're trying to do something like that, right? They're trying to empty jump, make me whiff a 6p, and then whiff punish me. If I'm looking to do this, they're gonna get hit for it, right? I'm just gonna be able to like place a button on them, and I didn't take any risk in doing that. So yeah, using movement, whether it's outspacing a jump in, you know, like this, and then just kind of looking to either whiff punish them or make them block something, or using movement to get under them. Those are all very good to use. Anyways, I think that's pretty much it. Hopefully this is helpful. Again, I think anti-airing is a very important thing, so I highly suggest that this is something that you actively, you know, try to work on when you're playing. If you have any questions about, you know, any type of anti-related things or anything really, feel free to ask me in the comments below, or you can hit me up on Twitch. I do stream quite often. You can find a link to that in the description below. Anyways, that's gonna do it for this video, guys. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed. See you in the next one.